Right, quick welcome. I said on Twitter that I wanted to start a discussion on Nuke and also on map balance in general. So we'll do that. I won't go into details about the current sort of new version of Nuke because I haven't really played it yet, and I don't think anyone else has either. And it's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit premature, I think, to just sort of look at the changes and say, oh, this will have all of these consequences. Like I'd rather see it happen before I make up my mind. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes down the line a little bit. Now, I have this theory about map balance in Counter Strike that says basically that you can have a CT-sided map and you can have even maps that are sort of closer to a 7-8 type scoreline, but you can't really have T-sided maps. And I think the reason for that is that essentially when you're watching a CT-sided map, you're not really watching the CT side all that much. As in, it doesn't matter so much what they do as long as they have an understanding of rotation on the CT side and money. They are going to win a lot of rounds. What you're watching is the T side and how they spend the buffer of rounds that they have on that side of the game. So they have 15 rounds that they can play around with and hopefully try and make some sort of impact. And they have to sort of figure out where is the weakness, how can we exploit the rotations, how can we find a way to make it through onto a bomb site and all of these things. And it's not easy. And as a result, any one round that they can pick up, especially the rifle rounds, if they win the pistol round, that's almost like an automatic sort of buy to get like a good distance into the game, right? But if you start winning rifle rounds, especially if you can break down the CT economy, then you're looking pretty good. So I think that's interesting. I don't mind watching a team lose 10 rounds in a row because I know that if they win 11 and 12, then suddenly we have a game on our hands. Like it looks interesting. It to me that's worthwhile. That's not a bad spending of time. Now, if you flip it around, if you say, well, what happens if you have a T-sided map? And an example of that would be Cobblestone, but I think it would be broad for any maps. You have to ask the question, what actually makes for a T-sided map? And I think a map can be T-sided if the CTs are going to have a hard time defending. That means whatever kind of setup they have, they're not going to be in a position to have enough people at a point of contact at any one given time. And that only happens, I think, either when there are too many entrances to a bomb site. So, let's say the T side had 5 entrances into each bomb site, then there'd be no way that, you can only have like 3 people in one bomb site. 2 of them have to be at the other one. So if either 3 or 2 people have to both sort of defend 5 different angles, then that's never going to work. And it'll make it won't even be Counter-Strike that you're watching anymore, and it'll just be deathmatch because the CTs won't wait for it. They will have to say, okay, well, listen, we can't defend all of this. Let's just go and hunt and see what happens. That's the only thing that makes any sense. So if you have that kind of scenario, then it's not even a Counter-Strike map anymore, at least not competitively the way that we recognize it now. And the other way could be that they have a couple of entrances to defend, but they can't get any information at all about what the T side is doing. And I think that's what happens on Cobblestone. It's very hard if you're playing on the T or CT side, to, especially late in the round, you say, well, there's only 40 seconds left. We should try and, get up on the plateau. We should try and figure out what's going on. Where are they? It's just very hard. It involves so much risk that it probably is not worth it. And if you don't take the risk, if you say, well, let's just wait around instead, then all it takes is for one guy to go down and the round is lost immediately. There's no recovery. That's what happens, I think, a lot of the time on Cobblestone. So I don't think that's interesting. If it was the case that you could say, well, isn't it just a case of, the CT side having 15 rounds and then, they have to find out the best defense? It's like, yeah, but there's no finding out the defense. The defense is, again, on Cobblestone, the defense is, let's stack 4 people in B and see what happens. And then we have one guy who is sort of looking into A, but he's not really even in A. He's just sort of hanging around. That way, maybe we can defend if they come B. Or you could say, well, let's try and stack 3 people on long, and then if they go B, we just lose the round immediately. But if they come long, then that's great news. Like it's not creativity so much as it is rolling the dice. And unlike when the situations are flipped, right? Let's say on Nuke, you lose 7 rounds in a row on the T side. You can lose those 7 rounds, but during the course of them, you figure out that one detail in their defense. You think, so if we put a bit of pressure on ramp, then the guy outside is going to rotate back. And it took us 7 rounds to discover that, but now we know, and now we could actually do something about it. Whereas if it's the other way around, you know, there's no guarantee that any of that will work. It might as well just be that, you know, that it's just sort of a roll of the dice, and you were in the wrong place, or you lost that first fight, and now you can't defend because now there are too many angles, which I think is the classic problem on CT side cobblestone. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't think it works very well. I don't think every map has to be balanced, you know, sort of 50-50. I think people make the mistake of they hear the word balance and they think, that's a good thing. You know, we have, you know, things are in order and they're balanced, and that's great. I don't think that's true. I think it's fine that some of the maps, maybe even most of the maps, can be balanced around CT and T side, but I don't think it's the only truth. I think there's another one out there that has to do with with sort of having a CT sided map, because it allows for a different kind of game. It pushes the focus of each half almost all onto the T side. Like, that's what we are here for, you know? And it asks something else of the people who played competitively. It says you've got mentally to prepare yourself for the idea that you could be losing 10 rounds in a row, and that's okay. Especially if those rounds are close, so that when you win the 11th round and the 12th round, then they don't have any money left, and suddenly you win, you know, the last 4 or 5, and then you might actually win the whole game. So it is kind of an extreme, and that's why I think not all maps can be Nuke, because that would be a little bit silly. But every once in a while, I think it produces some pretty good games. Now, onto the map design itself. I'm going to inflict this upon you because you can't stop me. It's paint, and basically just some map theory that I've come up with. I'm sure other people must have talked about this at one point, but let's take Dust 2 as the example. So that would be the A bomb site, that would be CT spawn, and this is the B bomb site, and T spawn is up here. And the paths to sort of get to one of these is something like this, right? You have 3 of them, and you know, to some extent you can sort of move between these 3 without having to go back. And the CTs, they move around down here, right? So that's pretty much it. And let's say the default setup for something like this is having a 2-1-2 kind of setup. Great. Now, that means the CTs are just moving along this line, right? The question if you're on the CT side is figuring out where to put your troops based on the information that you get throughout the course of the round. And that's pretty much it, right? So you can move up and try and get that information, or you can just trust that what you're doing is fine. Like you're free to play it however you want, but at a basic level, you're playing this sort of very straight game where you're moving your troops around as much as you can on the back line to try and get them into position, so that when eventually the T side comes in, you're in position. And the terrorist side wants to do the opposite. So I think that's also perfectly intelligible. That makes a lot of sense. And it's a really, really, really great core map design. You can find the logic of this map design in almost every Counter-Strike map, and there's a reason for that. It's because it works so well. Like it really is. It's like a much more interesting game of sort of rock paper scissors, right? Because you do have like these 3 different ways of doing it, but they can be combined, and you can throw in fakes, and you can there's so much stuff that happens. It's such a great basic layout. So more power to it. I don't want to argue against that style at all. I think it works really well, and I think I've tried to think a lot about how you could beat that system and sort of like come up with something that's more clever, and I'm not sure that I can. Like, I think it is quite a good system. Now, Nuke is a bit different, and I'll try and explain why. The obvious difference is that the bomb sites are stacked on top of each other. And then you've got, T spawn over here and CT spawn over here or something. So I think you would be mistaken in saying that the result is that you're on, all the other maps, you're sort of defending against this horizontal line, and then on Nuke, it's sort of more of a vertical one, and that's the difference. I don't think that's how it works. I think what happens is a bit more complicated, and it's more something like you have a bit of a twisted. You have a sort of circle that may sometimes loop on top of itself, but sort of roughly speaking, it 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 sort of goes out and then it go. You could sort of get into the B bomb site and maybe it loops back around and then up to A. So you have a circle, and along that circle is basically where you put your defenders, your CT side. That's where you sort of you make them sort of stand on different positions along this, and that is worth thinking about. I'll try and show you what the circle is. I mean, again, this is by no means science, so bear with me for a minute here. But let's say the circle starts around this ladder and it goes down, and you can sort of make your way down here and up here and all the way around, and then you end up going in here somewhere, and it connects with itself around this area. So that's the full extent of the circle. That's where you want to defend. Right? That covers everything you want to defend as a CT. I know there are other ways to sort of do it. There's obviously this vent, which is this is the genius of Nuke. I think this is the departure from the logic basically, which makes it so much fun. But if you imagine that circle can be the widest, it can cover the most of the map when you have all 5 players alive, right? That's when you really have like the full circle going on. And as you lose players, you have to make a choice about how to constrict the circle, like how to make it the circumference of it or whatever, the smaller. So that's what you have to do, right? So if one guy is holding yard and he goes down, then is it this player up here that goes to sort of pick up that position, leaving a bit less defense in here, or is it in fact the player playing ramp that has to fall back and try and sort of cover this position, right? There are some rotational questions that have to be answered when you're playing the CT side, and if they don't work out well, then you're going to lose map control and probably lose the round. Now, the most successful T rounds on Nuke involve getting a pick off on somebody and then trying to manipulate the rotation after that. I mean, that's probably true on all maps, but I would say it is sort of the key opening to figuring out how to win T rounds on Nuke is having to do with sort of, you have an opening every time it happens. Somebody else on the map has to move on the CT side in a particular way. And if you can figure out how they do that, if you can figure out the system for it, watch their demo, any kind of information you can get to say, okay, well, every time that guy goes down, it's somebody else that moves, and we have to sort of figure out how that works. I would say then you're a long way there. And the reason why it's also so CT-sided is that the circle can become really small. Like, it can become down to 3 players, right? So you still have sort of a circular defense, but it's very tight all of a sudden. Like, you only have 3 people left and they still have 5, and you have to try and cover all the points. As I said, there are some departures from the logic where you could sort of defend, you can sort of jump from the upper part of the circle to the lower through a vent, and that obviously means that you can be even more dynamic, right? You can really sort of change it a lot. But I still think it's worth keeping that circle in mind. I don't think it's quite the same as the other maps. Like, I think if you made the mistake of saying, well, isn't it just a question of someone holding ramp and someone holding A and someone holding yard, so then you have the same lineup as you do on Dust 2, which would be, down here? I would say probably not. Because this model up here ignores the idea that there's this whole lower ground, right? Like, it's not obvious from the defense if when somebody goes down, who's going to take that person's position on the CT side. And I think that question is really worth thinking about, and it really has a lot to do with how people play Nuke. I also think it's a reason why many people don't like playing Nuke, because if I'm playing Dust 2, right, and we have like 2 people in A and 1 person in middle and 2 people in B, and this is the defense, and this guy goes down, like one of these, so now we have like, 1 and then 2 and then 1, you will make the like it's kind of unlikely that this guy will rotate all the way over and join B. In that case, it's at least if you still want to have 2 and B, it makes more sense that the guy in middle goes over, and then this, like, that choice is logistically the only choice that makes sense. Otherwise, you're just kind of moving people too much across the map, right? But because this map is stacked on top of each other, and because the circle sort of loops back on itself, that choice isn't clear at all. And it's a huge strength of the defense to be able to do this if it works. But if it doesn't work, then everything breaks down and it becomes a bit different, I would say. So that's my 2 cents on the issue. I hope you guys will, debate me on this and tell me why I'm wrong and tell me why I've screwed it all up. Do it down in the comments or on social media or wherever you happen to find a discussion about this. I'd love to have more about it. I don't think we talk about the maps and the designs and the layouts enough. And then maybe if we do, we can get better maps just from sort of opening up that talk. So think about it, and I'll see you soon.